This is a recording for the subjunctive practice passage that begins Sextus et Marcus and ends with the first sentence conspexere. I'm recording this outside, so I apologize if any noises like airplanes or dogs or stuff like that. But nevertheless, Sextus et Marcus, that's our subject, and the verb is right below it, conspexere. It is a perfect verb, so they caught sight of a wolf in Silva in the woods. A wolf qui, who had devoured, devoravisset is a pluperfect subjunctive, who had often devoured, saipe homines. Devoravisset is of course subjunctive because it is telling us that it is not the specific man-killing wolf, but rather the kind of wolf. Sextus non dubitant. Sextus does not doubt, quin, that the wolf desires to devour him. Cupiat here is a subjunctive, present subjunctive, from cupio cupere, because it is in a quin clause expressing doubt, introduced by that doubting verb, dubitant. Cum sextus. Well, we see the cum, we look for the ablative, we don't see it. Sextus is nominative, and we look at the verb effugisset, and it is pluperfect, subjunctive, and then we see the tamen in the clause upon which it is dependent. So, although cum, Sextus had fled the danger, periculum, correndo. This is a gerund. It is not modifying anything, and it is the ablative of means, by the act of running. Calerius. IUS is going to indicate either a nominative or accusative neuter comparative, or all comparative adverbs, and it's an adverb here describing by running more quickly. Multo is the ablative showing the degree of difference. By much, we in English would idiomatically say much more quickly. Lupo, than the wolf. Than the wolf is the ablative of comparison. If you were to replace it with a quam, it would be quam lupus, because it is being compared to Sextus's running. So, although Sextus had fled the danger by running more quickly by much than the wolf, he ascended. He climbed, and that's a perfect tense because I know due to sequence of tense it is not going to be present, although the form would be exactly the same. Nevertheless, he climbed a very tall altissimum arboretum tree, so that, skiret, he would know, so that he might know. This clause, skiret, is your purpose clause, and purpose clause, so that he might know that lupum se laedere non posse. That is an indirect statement with lupum being the accusative subject and posse being your infinitive verb, so that he would know that the wolf was not able, laedere se, to harm him. Sextus Marco. Sextus says to Marcus, quid agamus? What should we do? Agamus is subjunctive, and thus it is showing a deliberation, hence the translation of should. We fear a giant liar. Ubi nos calamus, where should we hide? Celo celare, first conjugation, and the e of we fear a liar. Utinam, would that, or if only, the wolf never had come here. Venisset is another pluperfect subjunctive, and it is showing the impossible wish with utinam. Marcus, meanwhile, Marcus Interia, he petits. He looks for branches. He does so circumspiciendo. This is another gerund in the ablative. By looking around, diligenter, just a positive adverb, diligently, humi, which is locative case, on the ground, quibus, with which he may repel the wolf. Now, the humi here is in the locative case because cities, towns, small islands, and the words domus, rus, and humus, they are all going to be expressed using a locative to indicate location. Here, because it is a second declension singular, its locative looks just like a genitive. Likewise, repellat in the quibus lupum repellat, it is in the subjunctive because this is your relative clause that shows the purpose of the antecedent branches. It's not the kind of branches, but rather why he was looking for them. Continuing, Marcus se computavit. Marcus thought with himself. Let Sextus ascendat. Let him climb the tree. I'm translating that way because ascendat is a jussive subjunctive, thus it's showing somewhat of a command. And et ibi maneat, and let him stay there. Both ascendat and maneat are independent uses of the subjunctive in the present tense, and so therefore it is the jussive that we see here. Est ignavus, he is cowardly. Postea lupum repulserat. After he had repulsed or repelled, driven away, the wolf, it is pluperfect, erat, on the end of the perfect stem. Cum Marcus ignoraverit. Now, we see a cum, there's no ablative, we look for the subjunctive, and we have it in ignoraverit. It is then going to be either when or since. I think it makes better sense since. because it is a cause of another action. So since Sextus did not know where Sextus was, or I'm sorry, since Marcus did not know where Sextus was, Marcus petivit. Marcus looked for trees, quas Sextus ascenderet, which Sextus would climb. Now, lots of things going on here. First, ignoraverit is a perfect subjunctive because it is in a cum causal clause. Esset, ubi Sextus esset, is a subjunctive imperfect because it is showing an indirect question. The question would be, where was Sextus? But here we're saying he did not know where Sextus was. And then Marcus sought the trees. That's our main clause. And here it is that he is looking for the kind of trees because it's quas Sextus ascenderet. It's an imperfect subjunctive, and it is the ablative, or not ablative, but the subjunctive in the relative clause of characteristic. You know, the kind of trees that he would climb. Cum Marcus arborum, that it be then inveniat. So when Marcus does find, inveniat is of course a present subjunctive because it's in a cum circumstantial clause. In which Sextus hides himself. Now, we are talking here, in qua Sextus seculat, about the specific tree, because kelat is an indicative, and therefore it is going to indicate that specific tree. So when he finds the specific tree in which Sextus hides himself, Marcus, and the verb that Marcus goes with is, of course, sentit, right below it. Marcus notices, he feels, and it introduces the indirect statement, arborum esse tam altam. He notices that the tree is so tall, ut variator. Ut variator, variator being a present subjunctive, is the, of course, ut result clause. That, as a result, he fears, nay, that Sextus may or will fall and may or will harm himself. Now, cadat and lidat, both being governed by the nay, those are, of course, two verbs in a fear clause. That fear clause, remember, you reverse the nay, and it is not translated that not, but rather that, because it is a fear clause. And again, you could translate cadat and lidat as will fall and will harm, because in sequence of tense, since we're in primary sequence, those verbs being present subjunctives were introduced by a present variator, and it indicates action either at the same time as the variator, may fall at the same time, may harm himself at the same time, or it could indicate action afterwards, will fall or will harm. Moving on to the next sentence, statum. Immediately Marcus encourages Sextus, that he descendat, that he climb down the tree, arborum quam celerime, as quickly as possible, and ne cadat, that he not fall. Here we have from to the descendat et cadat. These are, of course, indirect commands. Hortator, hortari, is a commandy word, and indeed it is going to then introduce the indirect command. The direct command would be don't fall and do not, or I should say don't fall and do climb down. Sextus arborum descendere vult. Sextus wants to climb down the tree, do modo, provided that the wolf has departed. Descecerit is a perfect subjunctive, and it is being governed by the demodo as a proviso clause. It's giving the provision of the other action, the wanting to climb down. Marcus inquit. Marcus says, may you climb down the tree, arborum descendas, and let us return home. Both descendas and rediamus are independent subjunctives, and so therefore they are the, of course, jussive subjunctive, and rediamus is known as the hortatory because it's first person, but they are giving the commands. It's the suggestion, may you do something, let us do something. And then he continues, cur in silva diutius moremur, why should we delay in the forest longer? And again, moremur is a subjunctive, moror, morari, delay, wait, stay. Now, next couple of sentences are difficult. Sextus in ramos fortimos pedibus ponendis diligenter arborum descendit. Sextus climbs down the tree, arborum, and he does so, pedibus, by his feet, with his feet, and that's modified by the gerundive ponendis. By the feet, or with the feet, about to be placed diligently, diligenter, regular old adverb, onto the strongest branches. Now, in Latin, they prefer, instead of using a gerund, to use a gerundive, which is what we see here, ponendis modifying pedibus. But if it were a gerund and not a gerundive, ponendis would have to be, of course, in the ablative still, but it would be the singular form that you have. Remember that the only endings that one ever finds on gerunds are long I, O, UM, and long O. And so, therefore, it would be, of course, ponendo, and then pedibus would be changed to, of course, the accusative pedes. He climbs down the tree, nay, so that he not fall. Or, nay, being, of course, as it's showing a negative purpose clause, lest he fall, et, and redeat, so that he return cum Marco, with Marcus, cum here being with because it has an ablative, domum, home, again, because it's a city, town, small island, and domus, humus, and rus does not need a preposition. Merely if you're going towards it, you put in the accusative. Sero, late, and then canai deorandi causa. Causa here takes genitive objects. That's why canai is in the genitive case. For the sake of the dinner about to be devoured. Again, deorandi, just like ponendis above it, is a gerundive. If it were a gerund, it would have to have that gerund form, and instead of being genitive because it's modifying canai, it would be genitive because of the object of causa, and it would be deorandi, and then canai would be the accusative direct object, because gerunds can have direct objects. It would be canam. Semper ad tempus domum ad canam pueris rediundum est. Now, rediundum est is difficult for us as our main verb, particularly because it is the passive impersonal intransitive. Let's break that down. First of all, it's passive, which of course means that the subject doesn't commit the action but is acted upon. Impersonal because the subject is really going to be the ambiguous it, not a particular person, I, you, or he or she, or we or y'all or they, but rather it. And it is intransitive, which means it is a verb that does not take a direct object. Now, usually in English, we have a hard time expressing, and we don't do it usually, intransitive verbs passively. For example, take the verb to fall. You have, of course, I fall, but you can't say I am falled, or I am felled, or I am fallen, or something like that. And so we have a hard time. We want to say the boy enters the room, whereas in Latin it would say something along the line that it has been entered into the room by the boy. It just seems odd to us, and that's exactly what we have here. Well, rediundum est is from redeo, redire, and it means to go back. It is, of course, in its form with the nd, paired with the form of the verb to be est, a future passive periphrastic showing obligation. Now, usually when you have a passive verb, the passive verb can have the agent, which will be in the ablative with an a or an ob. But if it's a future passive periphrastic, its agency is going to be expressed by the dative, and that's what you have with pueris. So, always, it must be returned, it must be gone back by the boys, pueris, ad tempus, on time, domum, to home, ad canam, either to dinner, or, again, ad can also mean for the purpose of, and you can then say for the purpose of dinner. And that concludes the passage. Hopefully it is of benefit to you. Good luck.